Hey everyone, and welcome to another Konoha Reviews, where we review games both new and old on all platforms. If you like the content that I make, then please subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you'll never miss a review when it comes out. Today we talk about the 2016 release Doom. I remember this game being on the top 5 lists of many YouTubers and game websites back in the day, and even had a few subscribers who were avid fans of this particular game and had it on place 1. This game was also a request by one of you in the comments, and thus I went ahead and played this version for the very first time. I actually did own Doom for quite a while since I bought it on a Steam sale once, but truth be told is that for a very long time I was not all that interested in it, since the game just looked like a simple shooter to me, because that is of course what the onset is. A shooter experience from the 90s and bringing that to the modern age with better graphics and sounds. Light on story, no reloading of the weapons necessary, and picking up armor and health items all came back into play. And that simply did not seem that appealing to me, mainly also because all the environments to me looked very similar. But then Doom Eternal came out last year, and the footage that I saw there actually did spike my interest, as the creators put such a large focus on the story, but also the environments look way more varied and epic, with you now fighting on Earth as demons as tall as skyscrapers were coming down to purge it of mankind. And thus I actually really wanted to play Doom Eternal, but first also wanted to visit the 2016 version to see where it started. And let me tell you that after completing the campaign, I was very pleasantly surprised by the overall experience, and have to admit that screenshots and trailers don't do justice to how satisfying it is to play Doom 2016. Maybe one can get enthusiastic when one sees the action in trailers, but just how smooth it all flows and how satisfying it is to shoot all those demons to bits can only be understood if you are behind the controls yourself. But let's take a step back and first talk about what the game is about and its setting. We can be very brief on this subject, since Doom 2016 is very light on story, but compared to earlier Doom games, there is a bit more. You wake up in a facility on Mars where a hell portal has been opened and demons of all kinds and shapes have entered to kill the populace of colonists. It is up to Doom Guy to rip and tear through all that demonic filth, travel through various facilities and even hell itself, to stop the female mastermind behind this plan, who believes she could barter a deal with the demonic force, which of course, as expected, comes and bites her in the ass. Story progress often comes in the form of audio logs or radio messages telling you to activate certain switches or systems in order to progress to the next area or open a portal. In all honesty, this story is very forgettable, but in this case, the gameplay is so satisfying that even I, who love story in games probably more than most other elements, can easily look past that. What makes the gameplay so good in my opinion is the pace and variety, with the game throwing something new at you every 20 minutes or so in the form of a new weapon, or a new enemy type, or a new challenge or even upgrade. The setup of the game is that it is a linear shooter, but the level design often revolves around you going through narrow passages and hallways, only to arrive frequently in an open area that is set up like an arena from back in the day with games like Unreal and Quake. These areas are often wide, have all sorts of objects to use as cover or to climb over or under to avoid incoming fire. Having this level design does indeed really feel old school, but in a great way, because it does give you a lot of freedom to traverse the arena, and since the game difficulty can be quite high, it is essential you stay on the move and dodge while firing at the same time. It's really exhilarating, and you can feel the adrenaline being pumped into your system when playing these battles. The arenas are often littered with ammo, health items, and armor pickups. Since you will surely get hit and you can die in a very short time span, it is essential to always look for some more pickups to stay ahead of the competition. There are even old school power-ups in many of the arena-like environments, like quadruple damage, increasing firing and reloading speed, double health, or berserk, where you one-hit kill all the enemies in a brutal fashion. And what a gory delight it is! They introduce a mechanic where if you do enough damage to the enemies, they will be stunned for a few seconds and start to blink. This is your cue that you can head close to one and push a button to unleash a finishing move, which will reward you with a lot of health. The cool thing about these finishing moves is that they are incredibly brutal, gory, and satisfying, yet they are very quick and visceral, to the point where even if you do 5 or 6 of them in a row, it does not feel like the gameplay slows down. The weakest enemies have, for example, finishing moves that only last 1 or 2 seconds, and it's often a brutal bash to the knee or crushing of the head. Larger enemies have longer finishing animations, but it's still very great and well paced, especially since you won't be doing those finishers as often as the weaker ones. It actually even offers some tactics to keep some of the weaker enemies alive longer, since they can be seen as walking health pickups. And if you're ever without ammo, the handy chainsaw will help with that as long as you have some fuel for it, and you can one-hit kill quite a lot of enemies and get a ton of ammo for it in return. And the soundtrack is just banging. I do believe that the soundtrack is a bit better for Doom Eternal, but here too, you have these incredible metal and industrial riffs that happen and get built up as more enemies spawn in. When some of the heaviest hitters appear out of nowhere, the music gets amped to 11 and you just feel the adrenaline and the aggression overtake you as you bang your head to that shredding sound as all you think about is killing all that demonic scum. It is a flawless deliverment in terms of presentation when it comes to graphics and sounds. The ironic thing to me is actually that for the first half hour or so of the game, actually it did not impress me that much, and the more you play it, the better and more varied it becomes, because so many new things get introduced each time. At the start, you just have a tiny pistol, and shortly after you have a shotgun. For the first few confrontations, you will mostly be facing 2, maybe 3 types of enemies, and all these clashes and battles feel a bit similar in my opinion. You get introduced to that old school method of finding colored keycards to get through doors and head into open areas where you need to destroy a gore nest, which will then spawn a whole bunch of enemies which you will have to destroy before continuing. But as you progress, the game then hands you more weapons, and you get to upgrade your existing ones for new abilities like burst fire or explosive shots, etc. Where in the beginning you were only battling 2 or 3 types of enemies, you soon will face 4, 5, 6 or even more types of enemies in the same battle. And I think this aspect is one of the most important ones why the battles are so fun in my opinion. Again, the shooting itself is very satisfying with the weapons packing an incredible punch and gameplay being smooth and responsive. But if you were indeed only fighting 3 types of enemies the entire time, even that satisfying shooting would get stale after a while. The cool thing here is that in one single battle, so many different types of enemies can spawn that you have to approach them differently in each in their own way. You have enemies that can fly and will fire at you from a distance, all the while you are dodging imps that climb and run after you, or the iconic pinky demons that charge at you, only to reveal their weak spot in the back. You also have teleporting casters or skeletal demons with rockets on their shoulders, which all act differently and require different movement from yourself. There are, for example, multiple very bulky enemies that will just charge you and destroy you with powerful melee attacks. So it is important to keep kiting, but at the same time, you cannot forget about the flying types, or the chasing imps, or those fat boys with their rocket arms, which can make your life miserable as well. Having all these different types of enemies partake in the same battle is what makes battles not go stale. There's even a bit of strategy involved, with you maybe wanting to use some of the weaker weapons first, if not too many high priority enemies have spawned in yet, so you can conserve ammo at the end when all the top tier spawns have landed. It can feel so incredibly satisfying to have some of the strongest enemies spawn in, and if you have a full minigun at your disposal with the upgrade where you can get an extra automated barrel, you just shred those powerful beings like they are nothing. Every weapon is just so great to use, from the energy rifle to the heavy assault to the minigun or that oh so sexy super shotgun, and of course also the BFG. Weapon variety is great, and there's a ton of extra abilities and perks to unlock and level up throughout the campaign. When it comes to secrets and things to find, the game is also no pushover. There are a ton of very useful things to find, like challenges that, once completed, offer great perks to your character, or areas that provide you with a permanent upgrade to health, armor, or ammo, and also items to be found which, if collected enough of, can increase abilities like climbing speed or ignoring splash damage of explosions. And then there are also the figurines to find and collect, and these very clever Easter eggs of small areas that are made to be like the old school Doom game from the 90s to feed that nostalgia. Really fun and a nice homage to those times. So even though the game is linear, and there are a lot of hallway sections, it still rewards the explorer, and there's enough to see and enough moments to stray a bit from the beaten path. The campaign itself is of pretty good length, and I would say a bit longer than your average Call of Duty shooter campaign experience. Probably around 8 or 9 hours is what you can expect here, depending on what difficulty you play it on. There are some really awesome boss fights in the game too, though they are all in the second half of the game, and I wish they would have introduced maybe 1 or 2 in the first half as well. The boss fights often feel like boss fights from MMORPG games, with you having to avoid line of sight, dodging incoming ramming attacks, or staying out of the fire by running away from the markers put on the ground before the attack's impact. The bosses are big, gnarly, and very cool. So overall, you can tell that I was very impressed with playing Doom 2016, and though it took maybe 20 or 30 minutes to convince me, in the end, I really fell in love with this game and understood what all the hype was about. Do I then have some critique? A tiny bit, but it's more nitpicking than anything. The lack of story is indeed something that I think could have done better, but my most notable thing is that I still think that the environments are not all that interesting. Especially in the beginning, you just walk through all these industrial areas over and over again, and the color scheme is always just red and brown. It's a bit boring. The hell levels are also pretty colorless, but at least provide you with some very cool imagery, and later on, there are some prettier locations like the clinically white marble facility, or the area that has been frozen over in the facility finally offering some blues in all the color palettes. Honestly, this is why I believe I will like Doom Eternal more than this game, because I think they have improved on those two minor points in that very same game. In the end, Doom 2016 gets a solid 8.8. It's one hell of a game that fans of shooters or action games cannot miss. At the end of the game, I was not experiencing fatigue yet of all the shooting and ripping, so I'm very curious what I will think of its sequel, Doom Eternal. Like I said, everything from what I've seen, it looks to be better, but having high hopes can mean that it might not be as good as I imagined. Only time will tell, and I will surely share my review of Doom Eternal very soon on the channel.